Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Roberto Corona. I'm an Italian anthroposopher and astrologer, and in this video we'll talk about the upcoming new moon in Cancer on June 25, the first moon of the summer season that is going to activate the Saturn-Neptune conjunction that in turn is involved in a grand minor trine with Uranus and Pluto. So we enter with this new moon officially in the summer season, which, according to anthroposophy, is ruled by Archangel Uriel, the severe archangel of old Saturn, who, with his warning gaze, urges us to transmute our vices into virtues. And in this picture here, you can see an angel painted by Leonardo da Vinci in the Virgin of the Rocks, who is said to be precisely the Archangel Uriel. So let's take a look at the chart of the new moon in Cancer, starting as always with the latest changes in the sky. On June 17, Mars enters Virgo. Here it is. Then on June 21st, we have summer solstice as the Sun enters Cancer, joining Jupiter here. We also want to point out a couple of very interesting configurations. On June 24, the day of St. John, Jupiter will be in Cazimi, that is, it will be in the heart of the Sun, so literally inside the solar disk that is going to cover it. This is a particularly favorable celestial configuration in the astrological tradition that will happen the day before the new moon in Cancer. But in addition to that, we have another peculiarity which, in a certain sense, counterbalances this positive event, because on June the 30th, the moon will completely hide Mars just as it happens during a solar eclipse. Now, the moon is going to completely cover the planet Mars. So in this case, we can say that it is a sort of eclipse of Mars, so to speak, meaning that it is going to affect us in a similar way of a solar eclipse, but this time involving martial forces in particular. So basically this means that negative martial forces will reach a culmination, a peak right before being expelled from the Earth, similarly to what happens during a solar eclipse according to Rudolf Steiner. And in this sense, we will monitor June the 30th and the days around this date in order to see what's going to happen, especially in countries torn by war. Now, this moon falls close to the festival of St. John, which according to anthroposophy marks the moment in which the soul of the world reaches the maximum point of exhalation. Now, the soul of the world finds itself, quote unquote, all out in the cosmos and enters into communion with the planetary and star forces in the celestial heights. And during this moment of the year, we can get a glimpse into the future communion that our soul will have precisely with the macrocosm that are a reflection, I would say, of the highest spiritual world, or in other words, with the future communion with the principle of the Father, the Trinitarian principle of the Father. In a certain sense, this festival indicates our final reintegration with the spiritual world. However, in order to allow this to happen, we need to start following the words of the Baptist, who says, "I must decrease so that he, the Christ principle in us, can increase." So just as after the solstice, the sun begins to decrease, in the same way, our lower self must begin to decrease as well, also following the warning of Archangel Uriel, to let our higher self to increase. So back to the chart, this is of course a new moon, meaning that it represents the beginning of the manifestation process of the etheric forces of the Earth, which gradually increase with the waxing moon up to the full moon. And in this sense, the new moon is a cosmic seed. It is a good time to sow and start new things. And this manifestation process is going to culminate with the next full moon in Capricorn on July 10. So let's take a look at the chart now. Sun and Moon are located at 4 degrees and 7 minutes Cancer here, and they can be found at the foot of the stereo image of Gemini. So these are the stereo twins, and these are the foot of the twins, and we have the luminaries here. Now, they, of course, as you can see, are in close conjunction with Jupiter, that is at 3 degrees and 32 minutes Cancer. Now, the Moon here is in a very particular condition because the Moon basically is, in modern terms, in modern astrology, is called here out of bounds. Now, what does it mean? The Moon basically is here in a condition when it is reaching an extremely high value in its declination, in particular 28 degrees and 15 minutes of declination. What does it mean? It means that the Moon is very, very high up in the sky, incredibly high, indicating a condition of exaggeration or irrationality or even weirdness sometimes. And this is because it is well beyond the limits of the maximum declination of the Sun, which means that basically the Moon is outside the band of the tropical zodiac, so it is out of bounds. And in addition to that, the Moon is not only in conjunction with Jupiter, but also in a partile sextile with Mars at 4 degrees and 34 minutes Virgo. And it is also, so this is the sextile, it is also making a square, pretty narrow square, I would say, with the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. And in this regard, as we mentioned, this conjunction is part of a minor grand trine, that is this green triangle formed by Uranus and Pluto, closed by 2 sextile by the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. So let's now talk about the meanings of the chart, as always starting with the physical significations. And first of all, we have here a very strong signification of exaggeration, given by the fact that the Moon is out of bounds and that the Moon is on top of that in conjunction with Jupiter, which, as you may know, amplifies this meaning of exaggeration. So both the Moon and Jupiter have this exaggerated state, and they might be driven by irrationality as well, but to do Cancer things. And as we know, Cancer is all about protection. So we have a huge impulse here towards protection. Of course, Cancer is all about protection, but how do they do that? So, and what does it mean that we have this sextile with Mars? And this sextile, again, is a partile sextile, exact to the degree. So basically, we have here, again, I would say a fueling of the rearmament issue, especially when it comes to Europe. Why the rearmament issue? Because we have Mars that represents the god of war, right? And Mars is in Virgo, and Virgo is the zodiac sign of industrial production. So Mars represents the war industry, right? On top of that, we have the square with both Neptune and Saturn. So the square with Neptune basically confirms this emotional and irrational aspect of the Moon out of bounds, whereas the square with Saturn in Aries is all about issues related to the protection of borders, thus involving all the open war fronts, which unfortunately are numerous. And on top of that, we have also the protest movements of this summer that we discussed about. They are starting here with this Moon to take shape due to the minor grand trine between Uranus and Pluto. So In general, to learn more and to better understand the Jupiter-Saturn square, I leave you in the description down below the videos about the ingress of Jupiter in Cancer, the ingress of Uranus in Gemini, and the video about the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. Moving on to the psychological meanings of the chart, the forces of Cancer here represent everything that makes us feel safe, protected, and also comfortable, such as family relationships as well as issues related to our house or to real estate in general. And we also want to add finance here because of Jupiter being the planet of abundance and money in this regard. But under this moon, we need to be extra careful not to make exaggerated and irrational moves that are based on an excessive sense of protection. So the square with Saturn and Neptune can definitely represent, for example, people crossing the line, especially into our private matters, as well as issues that threaten our sense of security. But in this sense, we can definitely undertake a good martial action. So let's remember this good sextile with Mars, but not allowing this need of protection to get the upper hand. Then, from a spiritual point of view, the new moon is located at the foot of the starry image of the twins, up here. So in astrosophy, as we know, Gemini is the constellation of dualism, but in particular, that dualism that leads us to the awakening of the forces of the I, our higher self, through particularly a me-world kind of dualism. And in particular, it is a very important constellation for us human beings since it holds within itself the memory of the creation of the human I by the so-called spirits of form, which Steiner identifies with the Elohim of the biblical Genesis. In other words, this constellation is the constellation of those spiritual hierarchies who sacrificed themselves to give us our I, our higher self. That is that divine spark that we carry within us. Now, since we are here close to the festival of St. John, the starry world in the celestial writing reminds us precisely his words and how our higher spiritual self, our divine spark, who is the carrier of Christ's forces, must increase, whereas our lower self must now start decreasing more and more. We find this dualism between our higher self and lower self precisely in the starry twins, specifically in Castor, who represents our lower self, who must decrease. Castor is the mortal twin, and in Pollux, the immortal twin, who represents our higher self, who must now increase as the Christ within ourselves. As always, thanks for watching. If you want to support my work, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell not to miss out on future astrological insights. I am Roberto Corona. See you in the next video.